Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll be starting in just a minute. Okay, well, we'll get started. It's 1 p.m. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are joining us from today. Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Cassandra Morris, and I'm a project officer with the Green Municipal Fund's Capacity Development Team. I am here with my colleague, Kiana Simmons, who is a project coordinator and will be doing all of the behind the scenes producer work today. This webinar is part of our GMF webinar series, where every month we feature thematic presentations focused on GMF programs. This month is around how to electrify your municipal fleet. Before we dive in, a few housekeeping items to get through. Firstly and foremost, today we have presentations taking place in both languages, which means unless you're fluently bilingual, you'll want to join me in clicking the interpretation button, which is the globe icon in the lower right of your screen. When you click it, options for French and English should show up. Please select the language of your choice, and you'll want to stay in that channel as the language of the presenters change. So we have one in English and one in French today. Our interpreter will adjust to ensure everyone will receive the info in your primary language. We will prompt you throughout as much as possible, and a special thanks to our amazing interpreter who will be working hard today to make it all possible. Aujourd'hui, nous avons des présentations en français et en anglais. Si vous souhaitez écouter en français, veuillez cliquer sur le bouton d'interprétation en bas à droite de votre écran. C'est un petit globe et sélectionnez l'option française. Lorsque nous passons d'une langue à l'autre, notre interprète s'assure que le contenu est toujours accessible dans la langue de votre choix. I will introduce the topic, and then each of our presenters has prepared a 15-minute presentation to share with you today. We're going to run through each presentation one after the other and use our remaining time for discussion and Q&A at the end. There is a Q&A box, so you can use that during the question and answer period, and the chat box is also available if you want to share any resources, comments, or if you're experiencing any technical difficulties during the presentation. You are welcome to ask questions or comment in the language of your choice. Before we dive into the agenda, I would first like to start off by acknowledging that we are meeting on the lands that have been inhabited by Indigenous peoples for thousands of years. Long before today, there have been First Peoples who have been the stewards of what we now call Canada. And so we would like to recognize the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people as the traditional custodians of the land upon which FCM offices are located, as well as where I am currently located in my home office. We deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and all First Nations, both in shaping and strengthening this community in particular and our country as a whole. I encourage everyone to take a moment to reflect on where you are presently and the stewards of that place. So for today, we are going to start with an introduction of what is fleet electrification, what are some of the barriers and some of the benefits. During that time, I will launch a couple of polls, answer questions. We'll launch a couple of polls and we'll ask that you answer those questions in the polls. They will be aggregated, so we won't know who said what. And don't worry, there's no test at the end of this. And then I'm going to introduce the presenters. We are grateful to have them joining us today. Jennifer is a program manager of fleet operations, engineering, and public works at the City of Richmond. And Marie-André is a general manager and secretary treasurer at Region. We will follow up their presentations with a Q&A period, after which someone from GMF Outreach will provide a quick overview of some of the related funding offers available. In case you're new to FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is the national voice of local governments in Canada. FCM's mandate includes delivering programs that build municipalities' capacity to do what they do best, deliver, innovate, cost-effective local solutions to environmental challenges, and to enhance quality of life for their citizens. The Green Municipal Fund is our largest program and is funded by the Government of Canada. It has a double mandate to A, support municipal initiatives and sustainable development through funding, so GMF funding offers you may have heard of, and then B, share knowledge and lessons learned through online resources, tools, trainings, peer learning, and networking activities. So that's where the capacity development team comes in. And it's the impetus behind this webinar and others like it. There are 5 sector focus areas in GMF, but today our topic of electrifying municipal fleets comes from GMF's focus on promoting sustainable transportation options. Today, we are going to talk about municipal fleets specifically, but this webinar isn't going to go into public transit and buses. So we're going to hear from 2 municipalities on their experiences, but in 1 hour, we can't possibly cover everything we would like to. So we're going to follow up post-webinar with a few additional resources that we expect you'll also find helpful on the topic. So to begin, let's start by addressing our first question. What is fleet electrification? What are some of the barriers and what are some of the benefits? Municipal fleets include a variety of vehicles, such as passenger vehicles used for company cars, road transportation vehicles like buses, as well as delivery vans and heavy-duty trucks. Fleet electrification is the process of replacing vehicles with engine technologies that use fossil fuels with those that use electricity as an energy source instead. Electric vehicles can generally be classified into 3 main categories: hybrid electric vehicles or HEVs, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles or PHEVs, and battery electric vehicles or BEVs. So what are some of the barriers? Funding is a major barrier to adoption of EV fleets, as it often is with any initiative. The purchase price is simply higher than that of their counterparts. And even with rebates, it can still be higher than in typical combustion engine counterpart. Electric vehicles require on-site charging infrastructure, which is also capital intensive. So faced with an imperative to electrify, municipal fleet managers often struggle to find the capital needed to procure EVs and install on-site charging infrastructure. Another challenge is availability in the market. Currently, there are limited options for commercial EV pickup trucks, vans, and class 3 to 5 trucks, which represent a significant portion of municipal fleets. And then there are operational concerns like seasonality, so how might it hold up in the winter, or range anxiety, which is the fear that the EV won't have sufficient charge to complete its duty. And this is still perceived to be one of the greatest barriers preventing fleets from going electric. While the upfront cost of an EV might be higher than a comparable gas-powered vehicle, there are other benefits that provide significant lifetime savings. For example, switching to EVs eliminate tailpipe emissions and can reduce overall emissions by 30 to 90%, depending on the source of electricity that you are using to charge the car. Since electric vehicles have fewer moving parts, they incur lower maintenance costs. And fully electric vehicles do not require oil changes or transmission fluid flushes. They also save on fuel costs, and with today's gas prices, I would say that's another considerable benefit. They are quieter than their counterparts, and so they also reduce noise pollution. Before we move on, I did want to take a pause here. This is the polls I was talking about, and we want to ask you where you are in your electrification journey and any barriers that you may have experienced. So the first question, what major fleet adoption barriers are you facing? Please select all that apply. There's a list and there's a scroll down bar. Okay. The results are rolling in now. Okay, so it looks like As mentioned kind of earlier, financing is a major barrier, as well as availability and supply chain. Operation coming in third, lacking charging infrastructure is quite high. A little bit in council support and training needs. So we're hoping that this webinar can help a little bit with the training needs. And we will have a presentation, as I said earlier, at the end about some financing options available. So stay tuned for that as well. And a lot of you are in the planning stages, so that's great. A few in the implementation and a few not started yet, but the bulk in the planning stages. Thanks for taking the time to answer that. That's very helpful. Before I pass things over to the presenters, I also just wanted to mention that LC3 and Dunsky just released a great resource for elected officials who are wondering how they can make the shift to EVs. It's 7 pages, but full of policy recommendations and implementation strategies for creating electric cities. But priority number 5 specifically talks about municipal fleets and transit. So I would recommend you give it a read and circulate it among your local governments because it's digestible without compromising on quality. It also provides some examples of municipalities that have made commitments or have begun the process of going electric. The link to this resource and others discussed will be provided post-webinar in a follow-up email. So without further ado, I will pass things over to Jennifer Kubejenga, and she is going to present her slides. So welcome, Jennifer. I will stop sharing. Sorry, just have to. There we go.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. There, can you see my screen? Great, thank you. Just going to move you over here. Okay. The electrification of the city's fleet actually really started with policy. The city's has a green fleet policy, which was adopted in December of 2006. And the policy really stemmed from some overall actions that were incorporated from our community energy and emissions plan, which we call SEEP. SEEP is basically a strategic plan that furthers Richmond's efforts to manage energy use and reduce community carbon emissions. It defines our municipal role in working with partners and others to facilitate not only energy efficiency in the community, but also developing local resources and reducing greenhouse gas emissions and our carbon footprint. The purpose of the Green Fleet policy was really geared towards bringing all the current progressive initiatives that the city was already doing and really putting them under one umbrella to establish a formalized framework to guide our decision making. The policy's objective really encouraged not only innovation, but it allowed us to collect all the data, and on that data, that's what we make our decisions. We are able to incorporate best business practices by using those new technologies and basically proving with that data that, you know, these decisions really make good business sense. When we first did our policy, though, I can tell you there was not very many policies out there. We searched high and low, and we ended up going to the United States, managing to try and take a look at some of the policies that were being done, not only in municipals there, but also in, you know, regular private sector companies. And we were able to come together and bring one together that actually worked for the city of Richmond. The city's Green Fleet Policy 2020 was created to help the city become leaders in incorporating innovations. If we had policy backing us as what we could do, then it was easier for us to move forward with those innovations and leading edge technologies. The policy really laid the framework for strategies to manage our city's fleet and outlined the city's commitments that encompass vehicle replacements, which of course included electric vehicles. And we're also able to use alternative fuels when we were looking at things like hydrogen, and the alternative fuels is electricity. It's allowed us to set really high emission standards for our equipment, vehicle acquisitions and replacements. And the policy also handles a way of us to not only handle idle reduction, our maintenance, but also a sustainable funding model, because a lot of the new vehicles, they actually cost a lot more. So how do we manage that and what does that look like? So a lot of total cost of ownership was allowed to factor into our decision-making processes. So during the decision-making process, our acquisitions, because we go out for RFQ and RFP, a lot of the times, we've actually incorporated a lot of performance standards into all our bid specifications. And we also have a council-endorsed hierarchy policy of how we replace our vehicles and with what types. So, of course, they have to meet operational needs, but there is a hierarchy that has been developed that we can use that protocol to sort of narrow what assets we get to acquire. So with our vehicle equipment reserve strategy, it really helps us ensure a sustainable funding model, and it's maintained for all of our vehicles and equipment acquisitions. We have high operational safety and efficiency standards that support reducing emissions through the acquisition of electric units as replacements. And the fleet has also adopted new technologies, including retrofits aimed at improving fuel efficiency and reducing emissions, which even includes solar panels on some of our vehicles. He's also worked with staff in the community and other agencies to support education and awareness on community-wide green fleet initiatives and adoption of electric vehicles. We've actually even developed our own Richmond EV lesson toolkit, which we call RELT, which is an interactive education program that's promoted through the schools that the school board and students help to create. And it allows us to teach about electric vehicles to the community and to staff. The policy has also enabled us to create data systems which incorporate technologies to accurately measure individual vehicle emissions and monitor baseline data so we can actually report out on them. So the Green Fleet Action Policy, which was developed by Council, really gave us a way to develop our Green Fleet Action Plan. And basically the plan enables the city to implement specific actions to green our fleet, which includes purchasing electric vehicles. The city's fleet is developing a new Green Fleet Action Plan for 2030 that will provide more proactive actions that are needed to meet new aggressive targets. So planning in the first electric EVs in our fleet basically happened in 2012. We had to do a little bit of planning for the infrastructure before they arrived, but we had a 2012 Nissan Leaf and a 2012 Chevy Volt, which was a PHEV. So this is really when the big planning started. We were challenged with not only what the future of electric vehicles would be for us, but also how we could plan for the community. So in 2012, Council basically approved a cost-sharing project with the province that allowed us to install 10 public EV charging stations at a number of community centers and at City Hall. In the planning to meet the demands of adoption of EV vehicles, the city, we include charging infrastructure in everything we do now, including all facility and park upgrades, as well as all new construction. And that even means that we're putting EV conduit in the ground for future use. So our vehicle placements, this is the hierarchy that I was talking about. So it's basically, we look for full electric vehicles first, then we go for plug-in electric vehicles, then hybrid vehicles, and then most fuel efficient gasoline vehicles where electrics and hybrids are not available. And you can see in the background, though, these are our brand new PHEVs. These are the Ford plug-in hybrid Escapes. So as far as low emission vehicles that we have, you can see that we started bringing them in board on 2012. We had 2 here. So you can see the gradual adoption up to 2020, where the numbers have increased to 18. We also have plug-in electric vehicles that happened around this area here. You can see how the numbers are increasing. And in 2020, we actually added our first hydrogen unit. So by having data, we're actually really able to mark what our progression is. And through this, we're able to go through and make better business decisions on what we want to add to our fleet. So you asked for some helpful hints. And I guess really the really big one is the policy really drove a lot of things for us. So get early buy-in from your management team and from your mayor and council. Policy development made things so much easier, and we were all on the same page. You know, when you have the same current goals, it makes things a lot easier to achieve. So the other thing is you need to align your plan with federal and provincial legislation. And because it's constantly changing, you have to keep on top of that and make sure that your plan is updated on an ongoing basis to make sure that it meets those criterias. And the other thing is now don't reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of really good information on Green Fleet action plans out there. Use them and customize it to fit your own requirements. Feel free to visit the city's website at www.richmond.ca. It's there. We're more than willing to share all that information. The other thing is fleet directives. So once you have a policy, how do you take that policy and encompass it into some directives? So sometimes it's bringing your fleet together to create a framework of action plans of what you can actually do to green your fleet. The other thing that we found really helpful was to complete feasibility studies to plan our charging, our support infrastructure. If you know what you're going to be replacing in the next 5 to 10 years and what type of vehicles you could possibly be replacing with them, then you can easily plan for what that adoption looks like. Also, the policies that are implemented by the federal and provincial government allows you to plan for your community charging as well. The other thing is funding is always a big issue, so the rebates really come in handy. So research and apply for any EV rebates or funding available for vehicles and infrastructure projects like Narcan or IZEV and Clean BC in British Columbia or other provincial incentives. And the other thing is keep on top of new technologies that are available and how they might actually work in your fleet. We call ourselves a bunch of geeks, but we love looking at all the new technologies that are happening. And, you know, we really try to figure out how they might work in different areas of our operations. We also use really good baseline data on our vehicles. It helps us build business cases and return on investments for the electrification of our fleet. And data will also help you determine where you are at on your emission reduction targets and allow you to adjust strategies to meet. We really say in our area that let the data speak. So total cost of ownership comparison, we are lucky in some ways because the data that is here is actually based on our own fleet. So you can see at the beginning here, we had like a 2002 Chevrolet Cavalier. And if you go down here, you can see that the total operational cost for 10 years is around $54,000. This is based on 15,000 kilometers traveled on all these vehicles per year and at a really cheap fuel rate of $1.30. So you can imagine these baselines here, except for the fully electric unit, would increase by at least $1,000 based on today's fuel costs. As you go along, we have the Neon and the Civic Hybrid even. You can see that the Civic Hybrid cost was actually quite expensive compared to the other units. But ultimately, our BEV and our PHEV, they actually had the lowest cost over a 10-year comparison because they have less moving parts and no fuel, of course, except for partial fuel on our BHEV. As far as our progress goes, there's different areas of progress. So one would be infrastructure. And we have basically in our inventory is our city public owned or public charging stations. We currently have 56 and 4 of those are DC fast chargers. And then we have our corporate infrastructure that's here in the green. We currently have 25 charging ports and 1 DC fast charger, and we are in the process of implementing an additional 56, and 2 of those will be DC fast chargers as well, specifically for our fleet. And this will allow us to adopt electric units into our fleet, which was one of the barriers previously. So our adoption progress and our inventory. So currently we have 16 plug-in electric vehicles in our fleet, 7 fully electric passenger vehicles. We have 1 passenger vehicle that we brought in as a pilot. We may expand that. We're working on projects to see where that might go. And we just recently received 2 fully electric cargo vans. And really, we are planning on transferring the majority of these cargo vans to fully electric because it makes operational sense. And the other neat thing that we have is actually all our ice bears for our community ice rinks, they're all electric now. So as far as our adoption progress, our strategies, is we're currently updating our Green Fleet Action Plan to reflect 2030 and onto 2050 emission standards. And we're going to have to incorporate all the aggressive targets that are there. So we research and develop needs assessments of all our current vehicles and equipments and fleet to align with new innovations and our GHG emissions for the replacements. And we also implement circular economy principles and scoring to all our acquisitions. So this is another area that some smaller municipalities may not be incorporating in, but it really helps with acquisition for electric vehicles because they tick off so many boxes. So again, we have a full section on our website that feel free to visit there. Another part of our strategy is that in August of 2021, the city joined the West Coast Electric Fleet's Diamond Pledge, which is a commitment to replace above 10% of electric vehicles for all our new corporate passenger vehicle procurements. So we are exceeding that target right now, but it is a challenge and we have to report out on it as well, so we're accountable. The other thing that we do is we have participated in an external audit. The first time was in 2016, and we've just recently did last week, and we did receive a platinum rating last time, which is the highest rate available, and this time we did receive a platinum rating with an even higher scoring matrix. So basically the external audit rates our fleet performance on environmental management and practices, and the city of Richmond is the only municipality in Canada so far to receive the platinum rating. Just to give you an idea, the first submission was 3 5-inch binders of data and information. And some of our challenges, we've had a lot of loss of our fleet incentives. They've almost disappeared. And there's also been significant price increases. So we have maxed out on some of our rebates that are available through the provincial government. And the other thing is there's a lot of no availability of suitable units. So we'd love to electrify more, but there's just not a lot of inventory out there. We've also had much longer wait times due to chip shortages and raw material shortages. And we've also had some orders canceled by OEMs. We were even the first ones in the order bank in Canada for some electric vehicles. And for whatever reason, our orders were canceled. So, and we've also had the problem because we go out for public tender, a lot of our vendors have not been able to respond to bids because they don't have any pricing and they don't have inventory to be able to respond to. So this is Evie, the route representative, and this is what we challenge our staff and our residents with. Can you imagine the future of electric vehicles? Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that really informative and interesting presentation. I've been trying to copy the questions that have come in the chat so that we can answer them during the Q&A period. I do encourage you to, moving forward, if you can put your questions in the Q&A box, it'll just make it a little easier for me to filter the questions. So we will move on now to Marie-André. I will get the presentation up here and share my screen just a moment. Okay, can everybody see that? Yeah, je vais passer la parole maintenant à Marie-André.
Bonjour à tous, je me présente Marie-André Pichette, je suis la directrice générale de la Régie intermunicipale de transport. On est situé Gaspésie-Île-de-la-Madeleine, région administrative au Québec. Donc, on m'a invité ici pour vous présenter le projet qui a été cité, qui est un projet de transport collectif en autopartage électrique. En introduction, je vais vous présenter, vous mettre dans le fond dans dans l'idée de qu'est-ce qu'est la régie pour bien comprendre notre travail là, au niveau du transport en commun. La régie est un organisme municipal qui gère une compétence au nom des municipalités. Donc, pour la région administrative au complet. Cassandra, tu peux peut-être passer à l'autre diapositive, s'il te plaît. Donc, la régie est un organisme municipal qui gère la compétence de transport en commun au nom des municipalités de la région administrative au complet. Donc, la régie a été créée en 2012. Donc, nous fêtons cette année notre 10e anniversaire, qui est quand même jeune pour une organisation en transport. Et donc, nous avons la responsabilité de gérer le transport en commun sur l'ensemble du territoire au nom des municipalités. Donc, nous avons les mêmes obligations légales qu'une municipalité. Donc, vous voyez à la loi sur les cités et les villes, la loi provinciale, et vient avec ça toutes sortes de codes et de réglementations au niveau municipal. Donc, à la prochaine diapo, vous allez voir l'ensemble du territoire qui est couvert par l'organisation. Donc, c'est un ensemble de trajets de transport en commun, de points de service et de service et de transport qui couvrent l'ensemble du territoire de la péninsule, Gaspésie et des îles de la Madeleine aussi, qui est un enjeu quand même important au niveau là, de l'ensemble du territoire à couvrir et de la densité là, de la population sur notre région administrative. Donc, la régie travaille sur la mobilité de ses citoyens sur l'ensemble de la région, qui est un défi très important. Elle se donne comme vision et mission quand même qu'on pourra voir à la prochaine diapositive. Une vision quand même ambitieuse de demeurer un intervenant régional majeur et agile, offrant en partenariat avec les acteurs du milieu des solutions de mobilité intégrées et durables dans la région, tout en optimisant l'ensemble des ressources en transport collectif afin d'être en adéquation avec les besoins des citoyens. Donc, c'est pas peu dire les mots importants dans tout ça. Intégrer, d'avoir une mobilité intégrée et durable dans la région. Notre mission aussi est d'accroître, maintenir la mobilité de toutes les personnes sur le territoire de la Gaspésie-les-Îles en favorisant l'offre sur le territoire. Un autre mot important qui est agile, donc d'être rapidement adapté aux besoins, puis d'offrir toutes sortes de transports selon dans le fond, en lien avec cette agilité-là. Toujours dans cette optique d'offrir une mobilité intégrée sur le territoire, le projet T-Cité était en soi un projet très intéressant pour pouvoir offrir cette mobilité durable-là sur le territoire. Donc, qu'est-ce que le projet T-Cité? Ça vient d'une démarche qui est initiée par le Conseil régional de l'environnement de la région et une firme de conseil en environnement qui est YHC Environnement. Donc, on présente ce projet-là à l'ensemble des municipalités, qui est un projet de voitures électriques intégrées au milieu municipal, mais qui va être offert aussi en autopartage avec les citoyens. Donc, on présente l'ensemble du projet aux municipalités du territoire et on fait, dans le fond, un appel de candidature pour savoir qui est intéressé à participer à cette présentation, à ce projet. Donc, on a 6 municipalités sur le territoire Gaspésie-Îles-de-Madeleine qui ont levé la main pour avoir un intérêt à participer au projet. Donc, sur les 6 municipalités, on établit les besoins de chacun, qu'est-ce qu'ils souhaitent investir comme équipement, puis on a déposé notre demande d'aide financière auprès de la FCM sur le programme qui va être présenté un peu plus tard aujourd'hui pendant le webinaire. Donc, on fait un peu une liste d'épicerie, puis on se lance dans ce projet-là de déploiement de flotte de voitures électriques et de stations de service disponibles pour les citoyens et pour le véhicule en soi. Donc, et la régie a été présentée dans ce projet-là comme étant un gestionnaire de projet, un superviseur du projet qui a été un argument très incitatif pour les municipalités à participer parce que la régie devenait superviser l'ensemble de ce qui se passait là, sur le territoire. Qu'est-ce que donc, le projet T-Cité, en fait, c'est un projet de transport collectif intelligent et électrifié qui comprend quand même plusieurs étapes. La première étape a été d'équiper les municipalités participantes en véhicules électriques qui vont être outillés aussi pour permettre le partage et permettre ce partage-là autant à l'interne, au milieu municipal, qu'à l'externe avec les citoyens. Ça consiste donc à optimiser l'utilisation des véhicules de la flotte municipale et d'amener un concept d'économie circulaire et d'économie de partage dans le milieu municipal. Par exemple, on permet aux employés ça amène quand même beaucoup de défis parce qu'on demande aux employés de ne pas utiliser leur propre véhicule pour pouvoir faire leurs déplacements professionnels et d'utiliser le véhicule fourni par la municipalité. Ça permet aussi l'intégration de l'utilisation des véhicules électriques auprès de la population et des employés municipaux. Donc, une première approche pour comprendre comment ça fonctionne, le type de véhicule, puis je dirais démocratiser l'utilisation du véhicule électrique. Et donc, dans le fond, la municipalité avait un grand défi de l'intégration du véhicule à l'interne, auprès de ses employés, les amener à utiliser la voiture. C'est quand même pas si simple, c'est des défis importants. Donc, on comprend tous qu'auprès des employés, il y a souvent un avantage financier à utiliser notre propre voiture, à déclarer des comptes de dépenses, avoir un petit peu de sous pour nous aider à payer notre voiture. Mais dans le fond, là, on changeait un peu cette façon de fonctionner-là. On amène les employés à utiliser la voiture mise en place par la municipalité et à utiliser le module qui est implanté dans le véhicule pour réserver les véhicules. Donc, c'est quand même un changement d'habitude, mais il y a beaucoup d'avantages environnementaux et économiques pour les municipalités à avoir cette gestion-là de sa flotte. Et ça nous permet aussi de planifier les déplacements dans le milieu municipal. Comme j'expliquais tantôt, le module a été installé dans les véhicules. Donc, nous avons 10 véhicules établis sur le territoire auprès de 6 municipalités. Il y a certaines municipalités qui ont acheté plusieurs véhicules. Nous, la Régie, avons aussi notre propre véhicule dans ce projet. Donc, le module qui est installé permet de donner beaucoup d'informations. Dans le fond, c'est vraiment un monitoring de ce qui se passe sur le réseau. On suit la voiture, où elle est, la vitesse, qui est à bord, qui s'est identifié pour l'utiliser, l'autonomie. On a aussi dans la flotte des véhicules hybrides. Donc, dans le module d'information, on sait le niveau d'essence, on sait le niveau de la batterie, à quel moment ça a été rechargé, à quel endroit. Donc, c'est beaucoup d'informations qui nous permet de bien comprendre l'utilisation des véhicules par les employés et par les citoyens. Donc, c'est des informations très, très pertinentes. Ce module-là permet aussi de gérer le système on dit de clés, mais de cartes. Dans le fond, on ne peut pas donner des clés de véhicule à chacune des personnes qui utilisent les voitures. Donc, on fonctionne avec un système de carte d'accès qui est une carte RFID avec lequel on passe devant le lecteur à l'embarquement de la voiture qui permet de démarrer la voiture. Donc, c'est très important d'avoir tout ce système-là. Le module permet, dans le fond, cette identification-là du client et de l'usager. Ensuite, avec cette installation d'équipement-là, dans le fond, oui, il y avait la voiture qui devait être implantée, mais il y avait aussi tout l'aspect de station de service qui était mis en valeur dans ce projet-là. Donc, chacune des municipalités a déployé ce qu'on appelle ça une station de service en électrification. Donc, un hub, c'est un endroit où on met de l'avant l'intérêt à utiliser la voiture, le transport en commun, le transport actif. Donc, certaines municipalités ont fait des choix différents dans comment on voulait offrir cette station de service-là, comment on voulait visuellement qu'elle soit attrayante. Donc, on avait bien sûr les bornes de recharge publiques pour la voiture, mais aussi pour d'autres usages, pour d'autres utilisateurs de voitures électriques. On avait des abribus, des supports à vélo. Certaines municipalités ont même implanté des vélos électriques disponibles pour les citoyens. Donc, c'était vraiment un pôle où on met en valeur l'électrification et la mobilité durable et intégrée dans le milieu municipal. Donc, il y a eu tout ce déploiement-là aussi d'installation dans chacune des municipalités qui est une étape importante dans le projet. En seconde étape, en fait, on pourrait dire le volet de clients externes qui était beaucoup plus le volet dans le projet qui était sous notre responsabilité comme organisme de gestionnaire de transport en commun. On est venu amener notre expertise dans le projet, amener notre expérience en mobilité, notre expérience en service clientèle aussi avec nos citoyens pour pouvoir faciliter le déploiement de ce projet-là et le déploiement du partage de voitures. Parce qu'un des freins importants pour les municipalités, c'est la gestion du client externe qu'on appelle. Donc, nous, dans notre langage, on appelle les clients internes, c'est les employés municipaux qui utilisent la voiture. Dans l'externe, on est dans les citoyens qui peuvent louer la voiture à un tarif horaire pour pouvoir faire certains déplacements personnels ou professionnels selon le besoin. Donc, nous, on amène toute la gestion de cette clientèle-là, qui était difficile dans les municipalités parce que les besoins étaient soir, fin de semaine, la municipalité est fermée, pas de service d'urgence, pas de soutien à la clientèle à ce moment-là. La régie, nous, on a pris en charge cette responsabilité-là en ayant nous-mêmes un service clientèle pour nos clients de transport en commun. Donc, on venait superviser tout ça et prendre en charge cette clientèle-là. Comment ça fonctionne? C'est que les clients commence par faire une inscription en ligne, un compte, on donne une photo. C'est un peu comme aller louer une voiture dans un comptoir, dans un aéroport. C'est quand même une démarche qui doit être faite. On prête quand même pas une paire de ciseaux, on prête une voiture qui a une valeur financière importante, qui est aussi un équipement là, municipal, un équipement public. Donc, il y a une responsabilité qui vient avec ça. Donc, la personne a rempli un formulaire, donne des informations, s'identifie. Ensuite, elle peut se présenter au point de service de la voiture qu'elle souhaite utiliser. Donc, je prends un exemple. Si elle souhaite utiliser une voiture à Carleton-sur-Mer, elle va venir se présenter au bureau de Carleton-sur-Mer pour signer son contrat, confirmer son identité, puis prendre sa carte d'accès qui va être, dans le fond, sa clé pour pouvoir utiliser la voiture. À partir de là, la personne est très autonome, va sur le site Internet, voit le calendrier de disponibilité de réservation de la voiture, prend des réservations là, selon ses besoins et le système se fait tout par paiement en ligne, là, carte de crédit, par la plateforme Stripe. Donc, c'est quand même très simple d'utilisation et ça fonctionne très bien. La plupart des municipalités ont donné une disponibilité de soir, de fin de semaine aux clients. Donc, dans le fond, pour bloquer le lundi au vendredi de 8 à 4 pour les employés, pour pas qu'il y ait je dirais, de conflit entre les utilisateurs internes et externes. Chez nous, à la régie, comme nous avions un nombre d'employés plus restreint, on a pris le risque de rendre la voiture disponible en tout temps aux usagers externes. Donc, ce qu'on demande aux employés, c'est d'être un peu plus organisés et de planifier les réservations sur du plus long terme pour s'assurer d'avoir la voiture pour leurs besoins professionnels. Mais ainsi, la voiture demeure disponible pour des heures beaucoup plus intéressantes là, pour les citoyens. Et ça fait en sorte que, oui, il y a des citoyens qui utilisent la voiture, mais il y a aussi des organismes publics ou des organismes communautaires, des petites entreprises qui vont trouver intéressant l'usage de la voiture pour des livraisons, aller faire des réunions, des rencontres dans des endroits, je dirais, plus éloignés. Donc, la voiture devient un peu plus attrayante. Dans le fond, l'objectif dans tout ça, on rappelle toujours que c'est un projet pilote, donc on fait des expériences. Donc, d'avoir deux niveaux à comparer de disponibilité de la voiture était intéressant, donc d'avoir quelque chose d'un petit peu plus restreint et d'avoir quand même une voiture qui était beaucoup plus disponible nous a permis de voir un profil là, des clients potentiels pour ce projet-là. Ensuite, un autre fait de projet pilote, c'est de quelle façon les gens l'utilisent. Donc, on a commencé avec un taux horaire, donc 7 de l'heure de location. La personne a plusieurs engagements, doit ramener la voiture chargée, donc, et dans les temps là, de sa réservation. Le système fait le suivi de tout ça. À long terme, on s'est aperçu que les gens avaient des besoins pour quand même plus long que quelques heures dans une journée. Donc, on a amené un tarif quotidien, donc un prix de la journée pour répondre un peu plus à ce besoin-là qu'on ne pensait pas avoir à répondre. Parce qu'on ne souhaitait pas entrer en compétition avec les comptoirs de location de voitures à long terme. Mais comme c'est un marché qui est en déclin chez nous en région et où aussi l'industrie du taxi est pratiquement disparue de notre région, l'offre de ces voitures-là devenait intéressant sur du long terme pour une clientèle de location de voitures, puis une clientèle qui était beaucoup plus dirigée vers l'industrie du taxi aussi. Donc, on a modulé je dirais, notre grille tarifaire pour répondre un peu plus aux besoins. Puis le fait d'être toujours en projet pilote nous permet de s'adapter aux besoins de la clientèle. Comme j'expliquais aussi, je vais juste voir mes notes pour être sûr j'ai bien vu là, tout l'ensemble du projet. Finalement, au niveau du financement, à la prochaine diapo, vous allez voir le diagramme, dans le fond, de ce qui était le financement du projet. Donc, en jaune, on est dans le financement public qui vient de la Fédération canadienne de municipalités, qui avait un financement à 50 du projet. Ce qui est en vert est l'investissement municipal. En turquoise, l'investissement de notre organisation, où nous, on a amené des sous pour pouvoir investir dans ce projet-là parce qu'on voyait le potentiel pour notre organisme en transport. Et le bleu, c'est tout ce qui est subventions autres, où on a été chercher du financement là, au niveau provincial, fédéral. Il y a des subventions au niveau de l'acquisition des véhicules électriques. À ce moment-là, on allait chercher un 13 000 de subvention par véhicule. Donc, il est venu s'ajouter au financement public déjà là, de la FCM. Puis, on a aussi eu un financement du ministère des Affaires municipales et de l'habitation au niveau provincial, qui est le fonds d'aide régional, dans le fond, qui est attribué là, à la région ici, qui a donné aussi un montant pour aider là, le déploiement du projet. Donc, ça a été un financement quand même intéressant, puis qui résulte d'une acquisition d'immobilisation, donc d'équipements importants pour la municipalité qui va permettre la durée du projet. Dans l'avenir, on voit là, vraiment le projet se déployer dans la région. On souhaite augmenter la flotte de véhicules disponibles. Nos objectifs, c'est d'intégrer le module de partage dans des véhicules déjà existants pour certaines municipalités et que les prochaines municipalités qui souhaitent intégrer le projet planifient dans leurs dépenses à venir, dans leurs immobilisations prochaines, l'acquisition de véhicules électriques au lieu d'acheter des véhicules réguliers et de les rendre disponibles pour les citoyens. On voit ce genre aussi ce genre de projet-là se déployer avec des camionnettes pour permettre aux citoyens d'utiliser la camionnette pour aller pour faire des transports, des déménagements, pour aller au centre de tri. Donc, ça devient très intéressant. On est vraiment axé vers la mise en valeur de l'économie de partage dans le milieu public, qui va vraiment devenir un élément, là, je crois, très important dans le milieu municipal, dans le milieu public. Donc, on voit vraiment un projet là, se déployer là, à long terme pour notre organisation. Alors, c'est tout. Je vous remercie beaucoup.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup pour cette présentation très intéressante. I like that we have heard two very different but effective approaches today to electrifying fleets. I'm going to now open up to some Q&A. We'll have our Q&A period. I was able to copy some questions down from earlier that came in during Jennifer's presentation. So maybe we'll just start with some of those. Kiana, I know you're running things in the background, but feel free to jump in if I miss something important. Jennifer, this came in during your presentation, but I think either of you can answer, if you have something to add. Where do you fuel your hydrogen passenger vehicles? So that was about yours, Jennifer, but how do you scope out the hydrogen unit, and what about the required infrastructure?
Okay, so as far as the hydrogen unit goes, we brought it in as a pilot. It was actually more of a consortium with Toyota. So we have a Toyota Mirai. We don't have fueling infrastructure to support hydrogen units yet. We may be looking at a pilot to produce hydrogen. That's something that's in our wish list. But the unit is actually currently fueled at a public gas station that has hydrogen.
Great.
And how do we scope out? We didn't scope out. It was an opportunity that was available to us to actually pilot one of these units.
Perfect. Thank you. Did the business case analysis include the cost of charging stations?
So
I think
cool. And that allowed.
Jennifer, I'm sorry, you're breaking up. We might want to give it a, we're freezing.
Yeah, okay, we're frozen. Okay. So to some degree, we do incorporate infrastructure charging into our models, but more so when we're talking about
yeah, unfortunately, you're freezing again. I wonder if we might ask another question and
Sure.
give your computer a moment to catch up and then come
Okay.
back to that one. So this one came in during your presentation, Marie-André. Is there consideration for heavy duty vehicles like dump trucks as part of the green fleet strategy?
Oui, ça va venir comme j'expliquais. Il y a déjà des municipalités qui ont déployé ce partage. Donc, les modules qui sont conçus pour les voitures sont aussi adaptables pour des camionnettes. Pour l'instant, on était un peu plus, je dirais, sur un frein dans ce projet-là pour question de disponibilité de véhicules. Donc, il y a eu beaucoup de problématiques d'approvisionnement pour les camionnettes, pour les municipalités qui avaient fait cette option-là. Mais ce qu'on souhaite, c'est oui, déployer là, dans les prochaines phases des camionnettes, parce qu'on pense que c'est vraiment un véhicule très correspond aux besoins d'économie de partage. Souvent, dans notre quotidien, on n'a pas besoin nécessairement d'avoir ce type de véhicule-là à tous les jours. Donc, on croit que ce serait très profitable autant pour les citoyens que pour les municipalités d'opter vers cette option-là là, dans les prochaines années.
Merci. Et nous avons une autre question ici en français, donc je vais juste le poser. Nous cherchons un fournisseur au Québec qui pourra convertir notre camionnette à essence à un camionnette électrique. La municipalité a fait ses recherches, mais nous ne trouvons pas. Est-ce que ce genre de technologie existe aussi en Ontario?
Moi, je ne pourrais pas répondre pour du côté de l'Ontario. Je sais que ça existait, qu'il y avait une entreprise au Québec qui faisait cette adaptation-là, qui a été rachetée récemment. Mais je crois qu'il y a comme plus de possibilités d'adapter les véhicules au Québec. En Ontario, je ne sais pas si quelqu'un, Jennifer, peut répondre.
I'm just sending this one here. So as far as implementing larger trucks into our infrastructure, so we are currently looking at the process of bringing in larger units, but it's really a matter of what's available that can meet our operational needs. So we're not currently having anything in our fleet, and we don't ascertain to have any of the larger units in our fleet probably within the next year. But after that, there will be opportunities available.
Perfect. And then an earlier question came in. What has the feedback been like on your electric Zambonis? Are your operators welcoming of the shift?
They love them. The reason they love them is because there's no noise. They're very silent. There's no fumes, and the units actually operate really, really well. And as far as maintenance goes, there's really low maintenance on them, so downtime has been significantly reduced to the other gasoline or propane powered units.
Perfect. And I think this question can maybe, I know that it's different for Regime, but if you have any feedback as well, did either of you provide training for mechanics on EV maintenance? And is it done in-house if so, or how do you go about that process?
So some of our mechanics actually came on board that actually had EV training already. A few of them have gone for external EV training, and we do have a full gamut of training that's available internally, and we open external training to all our mechanics as they request.
Perfect. I might just ask one more question. Before we, so what percentage of your fleets are EV, and do you have any targets in place?
So I think it goes back to, we're trying to basically meet the strategies for our provincial targets and federal targets. So right now we're probably around 10% of our passenger fleet. That's our target. And all the acquisitions that I'm working on right now for passenger vehicles are all for either fully electric or plug-in electric hybrid.
Perfect. Thank you. So I think that we'll just end our question and answer period unless Marie-André, si vous avez quelque chose à ajouter avant qu'on termine la période des questions et réponses. Je sais que ça prend 1 minute pour comme la translation, donc. No? D'accord. So we will move on to, we have a presentation, a very brief presentation about GMF funding offers that are related to this. So I will also pass now to Noemi, who has joined us. And I realize I have the slides for that. So bear with me for a moment while I share my screen.
All right, super. Thanks, Cassandra. So hi everyone. My name is Noemi DeVeist, and I wanted to take a couple minutes today just to zoom in on the funding that we have for transport through GMF. So as Cassandra mentioned early on in the presentation, the Green Municipal Fund works across a number of sectors, so waste management, water, energy, land use. But within our transport funding, we can fund a number of projects, including some of the ones that you heard about today. So we have funding for feasibility studies, pilots, and capital projects that can focus on reducing fuel use within municipal fleets or GHG emissions, but also in transport or commuting options more generally. So to give you some examples of the kind of things that we've been able to fund in the past and that are currently eligible projects, you can do fleet optimization studies. So looking at which vehicles within your fleet would be the best ones to electrify, for example, or to fuel switch. What's it going to cost? Is it technically feasible? We have provided some funding for fueling infrastructure as part of those kind of fleet studies. We've funded pilots, so for things like we funded a couple of projects for electric fire trucks or for electric waste trucks. And as Marie-André just described in great detail, we have some funding for intelligent transport networks as well. So pretty broad in terms of what we've been able to fund. And Cassandra, if you're able to jump to the next slide, I can get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of what the numbers look like. So our funding offer is really designed to support you at different stages of your project, wherever you might be. So if you're a little bit early on, just trying to understand what is it that you're trying to do, does it make financial sense? Is it technically feasible? We can provide feasibility study funding. So that's a grant that can go up to $175,000 for 50% of project costs. In most cases, in some cases for smaller municipalities, we can sometimes stretch that to 80%. If you're a little bit further along and you're really at the stage when you have done some of that early feasibility assessment, maybe you have a baseline performance, you have a good idea of what your GHG or fuel savings might be, but you want to test something, then we can provide pilot funding, which is up to $500,000. And maybe one thing I'll underline is that for our pilot fund, we're really able to fund things that are trying out something that's kind of innovative for the municipal context. So the project that Marie-André described is a really awesome example of that. So I'd say, for example, if you're looking to replace some of your passenger vehicles, maybe that's not quite something that we could, with EVs, I should say, it's nothing we can quite fund as a pilot, because we're really looking for projects where there's a bit of uncertainty. You really want to test out, does this work for us in the municipal context? And then finally, if you are ready to go with a big scale capital project, maybe you have quite a lot of EVs that you're ready to acquire, we can provide capital project funding. In most cases, it goes up to $5 million for total funding. So the majority of that is a loan with a supporting grant that kind of helps give a really interesting, effective interest rate when you take into account the grant. In some cases, if it is a really high impact project, we have provided funding of up to $10 million for those kind of capital projects. So in terms of who can apply for this funding, it's any municipality, any province or territory, as well as municipal partners. So if you are working with a nonprofit or a private organization and you're delivering a project together, as long as we can see really strong evidence of municipal partnership and the municipality is putting some funding towards that project too, we can also fund your partner organizations. When to apply. The nice part about our fund is that it's ongoing. We don't have any set deadline. So the best time to apply, I always think, is when a project is most ready to put forward the strongest proposal. And yeah, we take applications year round. So I might leave it there. It's kind of a very quick whirlwind tour of our transport funding. I'm going to put my contact information in the chat again. If you have any questions, I really welcome any calls or emails. Happy to chat about your projects to see if maybe GMF can provide a little bit of support to the work you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks, Noemi. And we are coming up on time now. I know that there's some questions we couldn't get to, so we have provided contact information for all three of our presenters today. So I encourage you to follow up with them to get the questions answered that we couldn't get to. And as I mentioned earlier, we will be providing a follow-up email as well with additional resources and links to help support you on your journey. So thank you very, very much for joining us. And I'll just quickly mention the next webinar in the series. So meeting municipal net zero energy targets while reducing energy poverty, the role of affordable housing in solving this dual challenge. So I think that's going to be a really interesting one as well. So please come and join us on November 24th at 1 p.m. At that webinar. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. Thank you, wonderful presenters, for presenting your content. And we look forward to seeing you in November. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.